other one, you bastard!
Brought to you by supporters who probably have better taste than this schmuck.
Although not as prevalent these days as the Prime Wars and War for Cybertron trilogies, there's this sort of reverence for the G1 toy line that often irks me. Okay, I say reverence, but in all honesty, it actually goes both ways. People either put the whole era in a box of perfection and never allow any criticism, or they insist the whole thing was shit and should never be touched again. Fact is, Generation 1 was simply a toy line, just like any other. There were some good toys and there were some bad toys. Yes, it was groundbreaking at the time, on a level not really seen with other toy lines. But at the same time, yes, there were some stinkers as well as some peak. And that's something that's important to remember when discussing updates of this era. Not every original toy is god tier. Sometimes a complete overhaul is needed to truly let it shine. Some toys can be recreated verbatim, just with better articulation, because the OG was already the creme de la creme of its release year. But others need something a little more spicy. Greetings, Cybertronians. I'm DrLockdown, and today's diagnosis pertains to both a versus review and a second opinion. Been a while since we saw this graphic clash, and it seems as chaotic as ever. Regardless, today's diagnosis pits two insectoid colonies against one another. The Prime Wars Trilogy Insecticons versus the Legacy Outings. Now, of course, it might seem a little disingenuous to be pitting these two against each other. The costs of these two sets, even adjusted for modern price increases, are vastly different. Even so, I think the difference in design philosophy is grounds enough, price differences aside. Besides, it's not like we're comparing a massive third-party masterpiece outing to a mainline deluxe, even though a lot of the time the deluxe would actually win out of the two. Still, it has been a while since the Prime Wars trilogy, so a bit of a recap is probably needed at this point. Following Thrilling 30, what we know as Legends experienced a bit of an unfortunate shift. Instead of being used to depict small versions of characters we knew and loved, it was instead being used to depict smaller in-universe characters. Mini-bots, battle chargers, cassette cons. The very thing that many folks really liked about Legends was taken away in an effort to, emblematic of the era, make things more G1. Guess just put it in the pile of complaints that you get harassed over because G1 fans are the only people with disposable income and everyone else are babies and don't get a say. Might sound like I'm exaggerating, but the mid-2010s were far more toxic than the fandom is now. Well, I say that, but let's be real, sometimes you can still kick the hornet's nest. Jesus Christ, it's just a toy, chill out. Of course, this shift was kinda short-sighted, as they'd end up redoing all of these years later with the budget they actually deserved in the first place. However, out of these, there was one exception that I do think benefited from the smaller size, or I guess 3. I suppose release order for these 3 is the best way to go about these. Kinda. Shrapnel sorta bunny hop between Thrilling 30 and Power the Primes, but I'll start from Combiner Wars just to keep things simple. Starting real strong, Hardshell slips in like a real bombshell, because apparently Hasbro lost the trademark at the time. For simplicity's sake, I'll just go with the G1 names though. In Bug Mode, he does really well to capture the G1 chunkiness, just with a more curved silhouette. He's still undeniably Bombshell, just with a more realistic vibe. Just a bit. The first thing you'll notice probably isn't the silhouette though, rather it's the colors. This is an utterly gorgeous combination of pierced, flecked yellow and deep, rich, shiny purple. It's the sort of shiny deco you don't tend to see a lot of anymore, in favor of more toon-styled flat shades. And it's a real shame. The deco combo really makes this guy feel a lot more premium than the $20 price point would suggest. After several instances of shitty yellow paint at the time of writing anyway, this is a welcome change. Interestingly, it's the silver that's actually a smidge messy this time, though far less so than it would need to be a problem. The yellow continues down to the sides, punching through with the bug eyes. I really like the combination of the G1 hinge shaping and the color choice. There's not a lot that's great with the G1 originals, and I'll get into that later, but this one part is a cool inclusion. Also cool that it functions the same way, though I guess why wouldn't it? The only other visible paint keeps itself to the legs, but it does so damn well. The black on the black, the black on the black, wow, that's a tough line there. The black on the back offers some nice breakup, as well as cohesion with the shoulders hidden under the eyes, and this metallic red is, again, gorgeous. It actually mimics a lot of the G1 sticker detail, which is something I always love to see. Recreating sticker detail as actual molded and painted Easter eggs is a wonderful concept, even if they bugger it up sometimes. It also creeps around to the middle, peeking out over the head, and it really helps him lean into the robotic aesthetic. Against the purple there is a bit of bleed, but it still manages to punch through, especially with its clean application. Combined with the riveting detail on the back, because he actually has cyberpunk rivets, this bug does immensely well. Although the mode doesn't do much much with barely any articulation, he manages to convey his vibe immensely well, even manages to avoid the trappings of Games Workshop grey on the gun at the front, which are unfortunately quite common at the time. Great to see. Of course, he's not quite without flaw. There's definitely some jank derived from the time period he's released in. For starters, he has these random 5mm pegs on the back that accomplish nothing. Seriously, why are these here? I get that every other Combiner Wars Legends figure had a hidden gun mode. Okay, every new figure from Combiner Wars that was meant for Combiner Wars. But like, Bombshell doesn't. Other figures, including Combiners, can hold him, but that's about it. I think Thew hypothesized it was a weird G1 reference to when Menasor held a bug for 2 seconds, but I just don't see the connection. The fact is, these are pointless and only serve to make the back of the bug mode and the knees of the robot mode look clunkier. As well as that, the back 4 legs are pretty damn loose. There's supposed to be a mechanism where they line up and remain in place, but the tolerances haven't really been calculated properly. Instead, they just flop around the moment you try to take it off the ground. I'm totally cool with this thing not really having any articulation. It's a Bloody Legends figure coming in at 20 bones. I do think it should have been more solid though. And the wibbliness continues through to the back section as well. The entire abdomen just kind of jiggles around if you aren't too careful. I think the intent might have initially been to have the arms lock into the bottom, but for whatever reason, they just don't. It's perfectly manageable, but it could definitely be better. But none of that does anything to ruin this Stag VTOL. Fact of the matter is, this is a wonderfully compact bombshell that goes way harder than it needs to. It may not be my favorite of the set, but it's absolutely the cutest in this mode. Not quite as cute as Bob, who still doesn't have a toy after 14 years, but still damn adorable. But if you want to look at my favorite, look no further than Kickback. Now, before we begin, I do have to mention one unfortunate thing. He does have repro labels applied. Yeah, they had that thing where they were selling the labels for a single cent, so I kinda had to jump on it. I'll try not to let it cloud my judgment too much though. Well, try at least, because this is still my favorite bug of the 3. They've taken the Chunkster and made it so dynamic with a subtle slope downwards and mean as bug legs. The head sculpt is basically perfect, simple but effective and sculpted just hard enough. It's a faux part that flips over, so they're able to give it an appropriate animalistic size. It also allows the yellow eyes to pop through properly, again painted incredibly crisply. Sure, it's a bit hollow at the top, but you know the deal. Moving further back, the clear plastic on the top is to die for. They use the same shade for both the torso and the wings, and although not accurate as it should either be grey or silver, it's easily the most beautiful part of the figure. This was actually a really cool sight to see back in the day, because it came right off the bat of Combiner Wars phasing out clear plastic wholesale. Not for stability reasons, but more so for budget cuts. Seeing Times Return bring it back was always nice, at least until the cycle began anew. The more things change, the more they stay the same. It also allows you to actually access an integrated gimmick properly this time with the Titan Master Seat cavity. It's a really lovely feature that doesn't interfere with any of the existing functionality, and it's actually a really cool throwback to the original holdovers. Yeah, contrary to popular misconception, the Insecticons were a Waruda faction carryover, not from Microchange. Sure, it was competing mostly with random bullshit and useless pegs across the line, but still, seeing it on and here, even if only by necessity for said line he derives from, is a wonderful Easter egg. Now, if only these 3 were done in their original Waruda decos. Moving further back, I love how the arms now become a proper abdomen section. It's not accurate to anything, but it really helps solidify this alt mode as a proper insect, instead of just a random collection of limbs scrumpled up. Yes, the exaggerated swagger of an ovipositor really makes you feel the pestilence of the plague. The legs have also been tweaked a bit, with robot shins and thicker bug legs. This really helps round out the silhouette instead of feeling like a bunch of bits tacked together. They've even added some tiny faux wheels to reference the G1 original. That's honestly a really cool feature I never noticed until recently. And these legs are the reason Kickback has the best articulation out of the 3, though that might not be saying much, as aside from those and the wings, there's really nothing else. I don't think he particularly needs much else though, given his size once again. And really, aside from some cavities on the head and where the robot feet usually go, I don't think there's much to fault here. Yes, a lot of detail on show has been enhanced with stickers, but even in his stock configuration, he is quite the looker. I'm probably a bit biased because of those stickers, as well as the fact I got him the night one of my old original bands had a really good gig. Honestly, I miss playing original music. Corporate weddings and parties are honestly exhausting, especially when you realize after you've started that you're playing for a multi-level marketing scheme. Those fuckers are cultists. I'm not actually joking, by the way. This is actually one of the reasons why I'm not doing professional music at the moment. It's just kind of exhausting. But even bias aside, this is a remarkable grasshopper mode and easily my favorite bug of the set. Doesn't feel heavy on the electrons at all. And that just leaves us with a much older release. See, by the time Power of the Primes rolled around, they'd actually already done a Shrapnel beforehand. Or I guess Scrapnel. You know, sometimes I imagine Hasbro just lost all of these names in a blackout drunken stupor poker over an illegal gambling ring of Yahtzee. Before the Prime Wars trilogy, we had Thrilling 30, a sort of stopgap between the previous and then current styles of engineering. In fact, it was this line that gave us the renaming of Legends class that remains in the fandom lexicon to this day. Of course, as an older figure, it's going to have some jank. Thing is, with Thrilling 30, some figures have stood the test of time, others have not. As for Scrappy Dappy, I think is close to aging well, but misses the mark just a bit. The shaping is pretty cool, not quite on the level as the others, but still pretty neat. I love the way they've done the legs. There's no articulation whatsoever, leaving the mandibles the only things that can move. But they're sculpted immaculately, really leaning into the wheeled aesthetic hard, even harder than Kickback. The head shaping is also really nice, more robotic than bug-like, but still really cool with its chunkiness. They even made really cool use of the head cavity, looking like a giant maw behind the mandibles. That's actually a really cool use of mass, as is the G1 styled reusage of the legs. Pulling up on the squad with a vented dumpy. Brain rot aside, it's a lovely aesthetic. Hidden beneath the jank is a very lovely beetle. The problem is the jank makes it really hard to find it. Unfortunately, Shrapnel breaks the chain of crisp yellow. We're back to wispiness. I get that it's a difficult color to do, but this just does not work. Also, while this one here's the Thrilling 30 version, they did nothing to fix this on the Power of the Primes outing. The releases and all of their paint issues are identical, unlike some other Thrilling 30 repacks they've done. Yes, I got that wrong in the past, which is why I was sure to triple check. What's annoying is they did actually try to make the yellow metallic. It's so close to being lovely, and it just misses it by that much. Not so close with the legs though, these fuckers are even looser than Bombshells. They're supposed to lock in place on the top, but they really don't accomplish this well. The only tabs keeping it in place are on the back section, leaving nothing to keep them locked to the torso. The tabs in question aren't even that sturdy, so enough jiggling and all hell will break loose. Looser than the actual legs themselves. The arms on the bottom don't peg in that solidly either. It's just a mess of tolerance nonsense that really brings the figure down. Also, no paint on the eyes, meaning your eye is drawn to the pins as the eyes instead. Bit silly if you ask me. I don't hate this mode. By and large, it looks really cool. The problem is, looks will only get you so far. It's clear the designers had a lot of growing pains going from Shrapnel to the others. We don't actually know who engineered these, as the era tended to attribute all the work to the lead Western designer, a practice I'm very glad was left in the 2010s. But whoever was responsible definitely found it difficult squeezing a figure like this out of the decreased price, something which I'll discuss later. But as for the set, even with Janknell doing things a bit wackily, I still think they look fantastic together. There's a remarkable sense of cohesion, which is especially interesting considering they're all significantly different shades of purple. This was actually a big point of contention back in the day, as folks were clamoring for a box set version that rectified this grave error. Interestingly, there was a leaked listing of a Platinum 3-pack in the same vein as the G1 reissue they did prior, but of course, that branch of Hasbro closed for obvious quality reasons. Honestly, even if they had done it, chances are it would have been in some bullshit tangential redeco nobody wanted, or if it was too inaccurate, it would have removed a lot of the flourishes that gave this set their immaculate vibe. I don't think we lost much, to be frank. As for my take, I actually think the different shades of purple unite them even further. Through their differences, they weirdly feel even more unified, if that makes any sense. Either way, if you're getting these for the bug modes, they do the job quite well. Of course, even with them being as charming as they are, updates were of course an inevitability. With every Legend small G1 character getting their deluxe day in the sun, and most of them being damn good with only a few minor exceptions, the Insecticons had to have their round eventually. They were sort of teased in the fan poll but ended up being completely useless because everyone got made eventually. Ah, Needlenose, my beloved. Eventually, Legacy would give us the three, with Kickback releasing in the first year, and Shrapnel and Bombshell being released in Legacy Evolution, and oh my god, these are some of the most boring deluxes I've ever come across. Now, I have to make this abundantly clear, these are not bad figures. They have problems, sure, but they are, at the end of the day, solid, chunky, and decently articulated. They do the bare minimum of what an action figure should do these days, which isn't something to celebrate, but is something that shields them from a rant on why they're the worst things ever, and the subsequent slurs and reasons to end things. But at the same time, they're like the alt mode of Prime Wars Shrapnel. Specifically the alt mode, because the robot mode is actually okay. Not bad, but not particularly good either, and that philosophy is spread across the entire set, much to my frustration. I guess once again it's probably a good idea to go in release order, kicking us off with Kickback. Boring old Kickback. On one hand, this is essentially if the Sunbow model jumped off the screen, and I know a lot of people will be really into that. On the other, that's all this is. There's none of the extra flair, care, or attention to detail. It's just an Insecticon, I guess. The head is fine. Instead of having a new head folds over, they've got a handy-dandy flap that folds up. That's really cool, but the head itself now looks extremely plain and has no movement to it whatsoever. For as clunky as the older one could be, it at least made him look more like a grasshopper Grasshopper, the arms are woeful, trying to copy the G1 transformation and succeeding extremely well, but that's the problem, you see. The G1 transformation kinda sucked even by G1 standards, and by recreating it, not even with love and care, these things just flop around and sit clunkily on the ground. Not only is there no motion to these, which is a bit of a step back for a much newer figure, but the entire forearm is just sitting there at the back, not giving a shit. Plus then you get the hollowness from where it folds out, and it's like, why did you do this? Coming up with a different transformation would have been way better. Same thing with the back legs, though I'd argue to a less egregious extent. While these are still just legs without much difference between the two modes, that is kind of what Kickback is known for, so it makes sense. I would have loved for these to slim out and do something more, especially considering the quality of G1 updates at the time and since. I will criticize the torso though, this just looks wrong. They've done the thing where they give you clear plastic, but paint the underside so that you see the silver from underneath. Nothing wrong with this idea whatsoever, there's been plenty of examples that have done this exceptionally before. The problem is that underneath, the mechanical detail is very poorly done. It ends up looking like someone chewed gum in there, or even tinfoil. Without clear and concise intent behind both sides of the mechanical detail, the intent is very quickly lost. With this big naff clear torso bit in the center, the whole thing ends up looking amateurish, and you're left wondering if it would have been better to just leave it completely clear. Can't really do that though, because there's basically nothing inside there, despite the fact they sculpted a faux hinge at the bottom. Yeah, this is basically the only part of the design that references the G1 toy, aside from the use of clear yellow instead of opaque. No wheels, no further metallics, just these two. And yet, in spite of that, the torso hinge doesn't open. Why the f would you sculpt that in if you weren't planning on actually going through with this? Genuinely, what a waste of parts count. You could have either had this open to fit Micromasters and Minicons as a nice throwback, or you could have used all that space to redo the arms and make them not shit. But no, gotta do things only present on the G1 toy in tune, and not a single ounce of effort more. I will say though, there is one element I unashamedly love with this deluxe, the wings. They're pretty simple as far as deco goes, but the bestial detail is something I love to see. Kinda makes them fit better with some of the Beast Wars figures as well as the G1 ones. Unfortunately, a lot of G1 fans really hated this, so they never tried anything of this ilk again. But for now, it's here and I think it's awesome. Fortunately, one really good element isn't enough to save the whole design. If anything, they kind of look out of place next to the rest of the thing. You do get some neat accessory storage though. Well, neat for mediocre accessories. Yes, for the first wave of Year 1 Legacy, they went hard on the Energon weapons. And as such, you get these two spiky doodads. There's two ways to attach them, the first of which is onto the wings. Not a fan of this, it just takes the simple but effective idea of mechanical bug wings and adds stuff to them. Not hateful, but kinda pointless. The second and more popular way to store them is as a thorax section. This is much cooler, though I honestly think the Legends one, again, did them much better. The use of clear purple just makes it clash with the existing color scheme, and the spikiness doesn't cohere very much with the mechanical detail. To be fair, that's kind of the problem with most of the Energon weapons. Least Evo Fusion was just a blatant lie used to get basic gimmick functionality with toys. Energon weapons were actively rubbish most of the time. Not to mention they took up a significant amount of the budget. That said, I'm not gonna cut this some slack just because most other examples suck. God, sometimes I really hate when brick and mortar stores hold Hasbro hostage, forcing them to include gimmicks that actively make the base figures worse. Not to mention f***ing with stock because they need their special servings. Is this bug mode bad? Not really. The problem is it's not really good either. It's incredibly mid, and everything it does improve on from the last version feels like it doesn't go far enough. The worst elements of this design aren't abysmal, but neither are the best elements particularly inspiring. It's a step above the Prime Wars Trilogy release, but not a proportional step. Can I really call this better than a Legends figure when it fails as a deluxe, where at least that one succeeded at being a Legends figure? No, I don't think I can. Unfortunately, in the words of Jeremy Clarkson, still, could be worse. Yeah, regrettably in bug mode, Kickback is the best of the three. It's all downhill from here, because the amount of perceived effort put into the other two bug modes plummets right into the abyss. For the next release, being Shrapnel, this isn't a bug. This is a brick that barely does any conversion with bug legs stapled on, and even then they forgot some of them. While I'm not one to undermine the Herculean effort in designing a transformable robot action figure, the vibe this gives is easily the laziest I've seen in a very long time. Who cares about cohesion? Who cares about proportions? Who cares about matching the vibe of the original? Easily my biggest issue is the sheer lack of care on the torso section. Yeah, sure, just leave the arms on the side and don't have them do anything whatsoever. Sure, that was perfectly acceptable 41 years ago, but I can't be the only one who thinks this should have had more to it. There's basically no room for them to fold in though, because they've made the abdomen block bigger and the torso smaller. That stylization choice could work if it had an overall point to it, but all it does here is make it impossible to fold the arms in anywhere. I guess I should be grateful to see less of the stupid chewing gum chest plates, but it still looks incredibly shit. In fact, it almost stands out even more now thanks to the chest being painted black instead of cast. It draws more attention to it and makes a statement. It's just a shame that statement is shit. The head section makes virtually no sense. The mandibles are legitimately awesome, but the eyes just blend into the black paint. Again, said paint is just drawing your attention to all the wrong places. Also, the head is completely visible. Accurate, sure, but incredibly blatant. What, you're gonna change the parts of the design that are fire but leave the worst bits untouched? The legs are fine, I guess, but for some reason there's only 2 sets of them? Do these little struts at the back count as legs? Do the weapons storing under the robot arms count as legs? Does anyone even care? Well, certainly not about the back section, which has to be the most slapdash beast former back section I've ever seen, at least recently. No cohesion with the torso, which was already made wider to fit better yet still doesn't bother, and a completely lacking abdomen that doesn't bother to hide the thighs and toes at all, because oh joy, that's how the G1 toy did it. Yeah, and the G1 toy also had hollow front legs. What's your point? Like, why do this? In a line built on crazy engineering that pushes the limits of what's possible, why just leave this untouched? Really, there are only 2 elements left I can praise. The paintwork is the first, with some lovely silver and red on the back and some gorgeous metallic blue on the top. Great work, fantastic, but why isn't there more of it? Did they waste it all on the torso? Probably, and if that's the case, big blech on that. Secondly, the mandibles are blast effects compatible. I didn't actually realize this was a thing until Death Review submitted his entry to the recent Legacy retrospective. Great to see that there, but unfortunately, this just isn't enough to save this. This is barely a bug. This is more of a brick with arms stapled to the side and mandibles at the front. Something like this would absolutely be acceptable at Legend scale, but not for a Deluxe, and ironically, the Legends version arguably pulled it off better, despite being the worst of the 3. And what really frustrates me is why he turned out so bad. It's so they could half-ass both of the Legacy Evolution members. Yes, you'll quickly notice the final member doesn't let you get away from any of this nonsense, because they're retools of each other. For whatever reason, these two share the leg section, so you can't even escape the vast majority of the shittiness. There are some elements better, the top section for instance. It actually attempts to genuinely recreate the design in comparison, with big bug eyes that you can properly see this time, some lovely silver paint, and a torso section that doesn't look like crumpled tinfoil. Still confused as to why they keep sculpting in faux hinges yet don't do anything with them, but whatever, who cares at this point. Unfortunately, for every improvement you also get an element that's worse. The bug head may be more striking, but now the robot head is even more visible. Like, why? All that room in the torso and it can't fold down? And now the bug just sits atop a massive brick of arm mess. Sure, it's better than being flung out the sides, but at the same time, this is like 1% better. How is that worth it? And the abdomen section is still just as shit, arguably even more shit this time thanks to the slapdash paint apps. Like, I get wanting to differentiate this from Shrapnel, but come on. Random stripes and mechanical detail while the core elements are left untouched? Whose idea was this? It just leaves you with a bug mode that's more of a side grade than anything, and it's really frustrating. I know I'm not really saying a lot for this segment here, but a lot of its DNA is taken from another figure, and that figure is equally as shit as this. I'm not one to dog on retools. Truth be told, retools are a wonderful way to use limited budgets to give us wildly different experiences. When done right, it lets you take a decent mold and completely reinvent it, redefining the experience. In fact, a lot of my favorite Legacy figures are retools. But this just isn't one of those cases. If anything, it's closer to Misfire and Slugslinger from Time's Return, with the legs plastered on at the back having no regard for the rest of the alternate mode, only this time there's no awesome trigger-happy equivalent to give a reason for. And it just leads to a set of 3 Insecticons that look decent together from a distance, but don't hold up to scrutiny. So, taking these 2 sets together, even though the older set has its fair share of issues, particularly with Shrapnel, I have to give the win to the Primors trio. What they lack in G1 accuracy, they more than make up for in just being cohesive bugs. They don't even have less articulation in most instances. In most, they have far more. Shrapnel and Bombshell from Legacy are borderline bricks. How do you make something less posable than figures on half the budget that came out a decade prior? So for the bug modes, I don't think there's any contest here. Not that I'm doing the traditional figure breakdown versus, because when you do it for 3 whole figures, it doesn't really work per se, but like, it's obvious. The Legacy one's issues will be fine if they were at Legend scale, but they're not. They're deluxes. This isn't okay. This never has been okay. Though it's not just because Legacy is stinky. The Prime Wars versions are actually quite nice on their own. Sure, Shrapnel is a bit wibbly, but as a team, these are pretty damn good to have. There's a reason these have turned out the way they do, though. A fundamental design philosophy that has caused this imbalance. I have hinted at it already, but I feel in general a deep dive is better suited for later. So for now, let's just move on to more interesting parts of the figure. Like the transformations. Kinda. The way the G1 Insecticons works, it's a bit difficult to do rather interesting things with them. But at the very least, the Prime Wars versions try, the Legacy ones less so. Guess we'll go in the same order, starting off with the Prime Wars Bombshell. You'll first want to separate the legs like so. That'll give you enough clearance to separate the arms like so. And then they fold out into the eyes like so, and you can bring these little bug legs back. They're sort of cupped around the actual ball joint here, and they work really well for the design. You can rotate the waist and rotate the legs the rest of the way. The dumb 5mm pegs just sort of stay in place. You separate the legs like so, and then you just kind of fold the bug legs back into the legs. There's no actual locking tab, but they do stay in there a lot more solidly, which is a lot nicer, and it doesn't really impede the knee bend either, which is nice. If you fold them out of the way, you get a full deep knee bend anyway, which is good. Last but not least, you bring down this hinge here to reveal the head, bring down that hinge to keep it on the back. Or if you really want to go G1 style, I guess you can bring it up like that. If you want to, you can do it, but I prefer to leave it down like so, just because it's cleaner. G1 accuracy be damned, although the G1 toy can do that as well. It's mostly the Toon that does that thing. Next up, we'll kick it back. Firstly, take these leg sections with the wings on the sides and move them to the back, which will allow you to rotate the wings onto the back sections. You bring the legs out of the way so that you can separate the thorax. They will then move up and around and peg into the sides there to make nice shoulders, and they can pose nice and normally, like so. And last but not least, you bring down the faux head, rotate this around. It's best to leave the head down so you get a bit more of a grip on rotating the head, and then you just sort of bring it back like that, and we are good. Simple, but the thorax does really give him an extra flair. Oh, and yeah, I also forgot to fold in these on their double hinges. God, I'm forgetful today. I need more sleep. And yeah, again, predictably, the only one of the three that feels a bit unfinished is Shrapnel, but I mean, we kind of went over the reasons why in vehicle mode, so you do get it, and there are some cool ideas on show. They just don't really form very well. First thing you want to do is untab the arms from the bottom. See Legacy, it's not that hard. Bring these out on the octagonal hinges and rotate them into place. You have to separate these so that they'll actually move out of the way. And you can see the only place they're tabbed into, which is not great. Bring them all the way down. Bring these panels to the side, which will allow you to bring the feet forward, like so and like so. You then rotate this section forward with the pelvis and then collapse the midriff, revealing the head. And of course, bring the mandibles out to the side for some nice juicy shoulder action. Still quite lovely. Oh yeah, and it'll probably happen while you're doing it, but you also bring these legs towards the back. God, I am really forgetting a lot of steps with these. I don't know why. So yeah, a lot of decent ideas, but does feel a little bit unfinished in comparison to the others. But I mean, at least these try to go the extra mile. At least these try to do more with what they are. At least they take the G1 designs and actually take them in an interesting direction. There's not a lot you can do with the G1 Insecticons given the way they convert, but these actually try. Unlike the Legacy versions. Yeah, these just don't do anything. They are the G1 versions with joints added to them, and even then, they're more so scaffolding of the G1 versions. I get that the G1 versions were kind of unfinished and kind of wonky, but these shouldn't be replicating that. They should be taking those designs and doing new stuff with them. Doesn't have to do a lot. The Prime Wars ones proved you could just tweak a little few things here and there, but these don't even do that. I guess we'll go with release order again. You want to make sure all of the weapons are removed like so. You bring the foot around, fold it in, and that will go into the back like so, and fold out the foot. And then these also untab from the legs there, but they're very, very loose. It's not as sturdy as the Prime Wars one, despite being a much newer figure. Anywho, you bring the wings up like so, collapse the arms together like so, or should I say the bug legs. Bring in these feet to reveal the fists, and that's good. Come to the back and bring this panel down, and rotate around. Yeah, it's G1 simple, and G1 boring. It's like okay, why would you play with this? This toy's just not giving you anything interesting, anything fun. At least it feels more finished than Shrapnel, though. Once again, you remove the weapon from the bottom, and you collapse the feet in. Separate the arms from the sides there. Untab these from the sides, allowing you to bring this whole section up. This will go into the back and lock into place, and these panels will clip down there, allowing you to also fold up the feet, and separating the legs too. Rotate the waist 180 degrees, bring out the fists as you would do, and bring up the head with these really gaudy panels on the side. Yeah, it works, but there's just nothing to it. It's literally just the G1 version, but they've added fists that fold out, and they've added panels here instead of the original just fold out method, so it's a bit messier. I don't get it. I don't. And then Bombshell is mostly the same, but there's something interesting to show later. It's not actually a good transformation, but just there's something interesting. This time you actually do the legs first, because that will allow you to bring the arms out like so. But yeah, then of course the legs work exactly the same as previously. Arms mostly work exactly the same as previously, with your little fists out. But you also want to bring the bugged legs back. You can just remove them for parts forming, but I think that's kind of cheating, so I don't tend to. But I want to draw your attention to the back here. This little panel folds down, and it doesn't really hold much of a purpose. And then this section untabs and does its thing however you want it to. But why is there that extra panel there? If that wasn't there, this would be able to fold much further back, or it would if it wasn't attached to the head. Classic Seeker much. It just doesn't make much sense as to why that would be there, until you consider Barrage. Yeah, because Barrage is actually the entire thing flipped around, and this is where his torso fits in. So they ended up building his functionality into Bombshell specifically. So it's actually led to a lot of people thinking that the reason that these were so compromised is because they were pre-tooling these for the Deluxe Insecticons, like the proportions in the torso here and the extra panels here. And I mean, kinda. You can definitely see it with the last two. I don't know if they went that far, and if they did, it was only really with Bombshell, but I do kind of see where that idea comes from. And if that is true, if they compromise these three for the sake of the Deluxe Insecticons, I'm not really a fan of that. Although I love the Deluxe Insecticons, they should have made these three good first, and then they could have retooled it after. A retool usually has a better chance of being great if the original mold was also great. And these three just aren't. They are just the G1 transformations with articulation, and the G1 Insecticons are not very good. So I just wish these had had some more oomph to them. So if I was doing score counting, which I'm not because it's 3-on-3, it's a bit difficult for that, the Prime Wars ones would definitely take the conversion. Unfortunate that the newer figures kind of suffer in this category, but what can you do? They were lazy, there's not much you can really do about that. You might think that you can probably get away with troop builders looking boring as f***. I mean, they're troop builders. Why should anyone care? Well, in today's day and age, no, I don't think that's fair. So many amazing figures come from the starting point of random nobodies. Why would you settle for less just because it's an army builder? Why ever settle for less? And that's why I'm glad the Prime Wars versions at least added their own flair to the whole thing. Much like the bug modes, they all look slightly different, but they still have a nice bit of cohesion together. Though out of the three, Shrapnel is still sadly the worst, though thankfully a little better than his insect mode. Yes, I'm only realizing later that I scripted these out of order from the last time. I blame Hasbro for re-releasing him and making things confusing. The torso is probably the coolest part, with a monolithic tombstone displaying proud and true. It's got a lovely metallic flex, subtle but doing a lot for the design, and the crisp Decepticon symbol does a lot to break things up. I love how the eyes slot into the shoulders on the sides, and the mandibles at the top look gorgeous. The legs are pretty cool too, with some lovely extra details that reveal themselves from the thorax. Maybe this step was a bit unnecessary as they don't have the extra budget to paint these, but they still look pretty nice. And the head is almost there. It's a really nice angular take on the old design. It just sucks that there's no extra paint to pick out the visor. And that's when you start getting into my issues, because a lot of this figure just feels stripped back. There's so many parts that just feel like they needed some extra fit and finish. There's the aforementioned shins with their lack of paint, but also the lack of a tab in the midriff, and how the legs just refuse to fold up. I'm not asking for something as crazy as Kickback's awesome folding-any system, but at least something. The back is super hollow. I don't usually care about the way the back works, but at the very least, fill it in. I don't want these to be shampoo bottles, thank you. The articulation is there, I guess, but with all this junk everywhere, none of it seems to work very well. It just feels incredibly clunky, and no pose feels dynamic. Even the best feature, being the torso paint, just starts to fade out as it gets to the edges. Couldn't be crisp at all. To an extent though, I do get it. Thrilling 30 was very much a transitionary period for the franchise. Let me just take you through the history of this price point for a quick second. Scout class. Up until Revenge of the Fallen, school, and this was a pretty well-established $15 budget range. Not quite as friendly as the $7 Legends, but still a rather nice outing for kids who only had a bit of spending money. Then, Dark of the Moon rolls around. Scout gets renamed Commander, and unfortunately gets saddled with budget cuts, as many figures from the line do. But it's reasonably successful, and once that's over, we get Thrilling 30. Just ignore the Fall of Cybertron stuff in the middle. The Legend's name has now jumped to what was previously the Commander/Scout price point. But for whatever reason, there's been a $5 increase. This is because they've included something I haven't really brought up until now: Minicons. Building off the weapon play pattern of Dark of the Moon Cyberverse, no, not that Cyberverse, these became an attempt from Joe Kai to give fans more play value. Then we finally get to the standard Legends we got in the Prime Wars trilogy, and although the $20 price point remains, we don't have Minicons anymore. Instead, all of that budget goes into the figures themselves. By and large, they're denser, better engineered, and better painted. Of course, sometimes they would re-release those old Thrilling 30 figures without their Minicons, yet still charge the same price, and that was greedy as f***. But whenever they did something new, they'd be done pretty damn well. And Shrapnel is a victim of that era. The full $20 can't just go towards the figure itself. A lot of his budget is being shaped by his pack-in accessory, like Needle Nose or Point Blank from Legacy. Needless nose to say, though, the budget just isn't here due to the circumstances he released in. And that would all be well and good if the figure was mighty fine, but oh dear, you're in for the exact opposite of a treat. Already the Minicons from Thrilling 30 weren't that well received, but among them, this one is especially infamous. Even considered by T-Fan Page 101 as the worst Transformer in his collection, this is another level of bad, though I'm not sure we should take his word for it as he doesn't believe Australia is real. Reflector here is basically the three bots combined into one single outing, and God, is it awful! At first glance, it seems alright, just a simple robot with some decent, albeit reserved, details. He might not pose much, but hey, it's a Minicon. You don't come to these for posing. But start taking a closer look, and it quickly falls apart. The paintwork on this thing is wildly inconsistent. The turquoise is awesome, absolutely love it, but the purple? What is this? Was the factory worker drunk? You'll also notice that he's always leaning slightly forward. This is because of the ridiculous automorph gimmick they included. The way this converts means that it butterflies out, which would be pretty cool, but for whatever reason, the mechanism doesn't have any locking tabs. Yep, none at all. So if you leave these stored in robot mode, the mechanism just loosens up and eventually becomes useless. Since the original review, despite leaving it stored in gun mode to avoid this, stress marks have begun to form, and the tolerances have slowly begun to get f***ed. In the 7 years since I did my original review, it's already gotten this bad. Imagine how bad it'll be in another 7 years. In fact, I recall this actually happening to T-Fan Page 101 specifically, so it's not a question of if, but rather when. Camera mode is a joke too, you've just got the entire robot mode sitting on the top. Like, what? Why? None of the other Minicons had this issue. The lens is nice, but the dials and shit are mounted from the bottom for some reason, meaning they'd be completely unusable. And it chips too. Come on, it's a camera, it's not that hard. And the gun mode is arguably even worse. Using the head as a barrel is cool, but the arms don't do anything whatsoever, and the rest is just hollow nonsense with abysmal kibble storage. I'm not asking for this to be the sleekest and sexiest gun mode ever, as that wasn't really what the line was known for, but at the very least, don't make it something where the designers came up with this sleep-deprived and half-drunk. Honestly, while these days I try to be a lot more forgiving of older toys, this really does feel lazy as shit. It feels like it was rushed out without much care just because it was an accessory. Even if the core robot was amazing, that wouldn't justify the way this turned out. All figures should be crafted with care, regardless of importance, regardless of price, regardless of focus. And this puts a bit of a dilemma on this release. Shrapnel isn't exactly the best Legends on the block, but even so, he is drastically brought down by the inclusion of Reflector. However, you may recall me mentioning the practice of re-releasing old Thrilling 30 figures without their Minicons included, and Shrapnel actually had this happen to him in Power the Primes. So problem solved, right? Just get that version and never have to deal with Reflector. Bish bash posh bash bish. Well, slight problem with that. As I also mentioned earlier, Shrapnel is compromised due to the budgeting limitations placed upon him. He just isn't at the level of the other Insecticons, so at 20 bones, you're overpaying by a 5. But if you get the full set, well, you're just setting yourself up for one of the worst Legends figures I've ever covered. No joke, there's a reason I used to call this thing a shitty-con. Oh, 2010s, so immature. Either way, pick your poison. You're kinda screwed either way. And ultimately, it leaves you with easily the weakest outing of the whole thing. Shrapnel just doesn't have the style or the uniqueness weakness of the other two legends. He doesn't carry the presence, fit, and finish they do. And Reflector, well, he's just awful. Even if he's the most unique minicon of the bunch by a long shot, that doesn't account for anything. Honestly, Shrapnel would have done way better with a standard gun like the non-F guns were back in the day. Sadly, they're defunct now as the molds no longer exist, but they were a really cool addition. Fortunately, from here, things pick up a lot. Bombshell is, well, quite fantastic for the price point. As much as I mumbled and groaned at them only using the Prime Wars Trilogy Legends lineup to do smaller characters, instead of regular characters at small scale, with a few exceptions of course, me dead, this is good. Bombshell has all the looks, all the builds, and all the posing. The head is delightful, easily the best of the whole set, with crisp silver and beady little eyes that are totally done with your shit. The face almost ends up looking like the Fallen, funnily enough. The bug details come across very well in this mode, even drawing your attention to the extra pectoral lines in this loadout. The eyes allow for some lovely breakup with the shoulders, and they lead to some delightful arms. The bug legs probably would be a salient feature with how they fly into the sky in a way Legacy wishes it could. They would be if it weren't for the gorgeous rook fists. I love this style of fist and wish it would come back in greater capacity in the future. I don't get why we haven't seen more of them, but whatever. These are sculpted immaculately, and it makes me wonder if there was originally going to be a gun mode like the other Combiner Wars specific legends along with the leftover 5mm pegs. Still, much like my favorite legends figure of the line, being Shockwave, it does nothing to compromise the figure, only carry to new heights. Now, the bottom half of this figure does ease up on the paint a bit, with some unfortunate unpaintable plastic on the midriff and thighs, and nothing on the shins. But they still do really well. The feet differentiate themselves well enough, and much like the beast modes, I love the rivets they've got. It all leads to a remarkable robot mode that looks way better than it has any right to. When combined with its surprising waist swivel, he really ends up feeling dynamic and sexy. The glow up from the thrill to the combination cannot be understated. If I had to go over any gripes, really it's just the bug legs. There's all that space in the calves, and they still find themselves hanging off the back, causing clashing issues in some poses. It's like the old Times Return Skullcruncher mold, which Shapeways artists proved could be fixed, but alas, it wasn't. But like, that's really it. The rest of it is bloody fantastic. I don't even mind that the head doesn't move, given that it's mostly sunken in and getting access to it would have probably been difficult anyway. And like, the rest of the articulation is bloody fantastic. The dedicated thigh swivels instead of the standard ball joints there do a lot in making him feel more premium than he ought to. So yeah, this guy rules. It's a real shame nobody seems to respect this release much. Even before Legacy dropped, so many refused to give him the time of day due to the lack of head motion. And yet, there's so much fun here, with two fantastic modes, killer stylization, a great conversion, and brilliant articulation in every other aspect. In an age where stylization really felt all over the place, constantly f***ing things up and falling into borderline third-party syndrome, this managed to pull off the aesthetic exceptionally on a brilliant toy to boot. So of course, regrettably, Kickback could never live up to the hype. Still, he does rather well and delivers a pretty nice figure. Not Bombshell levels, but still pretty good. He's certainly the cleanest and the most refined of the three, though coming off the back of the two previous attempts, you'd hope that would be the case. Hand sculpt used to be my favorite of the bunch, though these days I think I prefer the way Bombshell did his. Still pretty damn good though, even if I messed up the stickering. Appreciate the antennae being rubberized plastic so that they don't break like the Blockies version. The torso might look extra nice specifically now, but even without the stickers, it's quite lovely. Just nice and simple gold, and it actually has a purpose being this clear instead of, you know. The arms are alright, though they are excessively long. Like, not even stylized long, just too long. Still, given the engineering that goes into these, as well as the insectoid stylings, I think we can cut them some slack. And you don't notice thanks to the wing section, which is lovely, even without the toy hacks. The back is actually remarkably clean, wonderfully filled in, and with legs that stay out of the way pretty damn well. He's even the only one of the three to come with an included stand port. Very nifty. Capped off with extremely clean boots thanks to the delightful engineering here, this becomes a lovely way to cap off the trio. Unfortunately, there's not particularly a lot I can say about this guy just because it's so simple. All of the really cool color applications are mostly from the toy hacks. And it's not like the articulation is crazy either. He lacks a waist swivel or anything ridiculous, but all the basics are here, so it's hardly anything to complain about. Though the knees tabbing in can get a bit annoying at times. I do get why they do this though, given the alt mode. Kickback is by far the robot mode I can talk the least about. The grasshopper mode just gave me way more interesting things to info dump over, and that's not always a bad thing. He's just a solid Legends figure and solid Insecticon, who at the very least has cool stuff going on with him. In any other context, I'd probably just do a Legionary review on him instead of a full one, but he's part of the set so he kinda gets roped in. And that's fine, he rounds off the team exceptionally well. And the team itself is certainly better for his inclusion. I mean, 2 out of 3 is a pretty solid lineup, and the last member isn't even at fault for the issues. It would have been lovely if all 3 were a slam dunk, but oh well, what can you do? And hey, it's at the very least better than 3 scoops of boredom ice cream. Now to clarify before we get started, I am not saying any one of these 3 are bad in any way. Compared to their insectoid loadouts, these are massive improvements. And those were already passable, I guess? There's no weird proportions, no weird tolerances, and certainly no underdone head sculpts. Mostly. But there's also no pizzazz, no zaniness, no bonkerzality. Like, take Kickback, for instance. He's fine, and that's really it. That's genuinely all I can say about him. He is adequate, above substandard, fine. His torso styling is still patently ridiculous without the inclusion of a proper hinge, but at least they tried here. At least they gave him some extra paint on his light section, even if it accomplishes basically nothing. You can barely see anything, and when you do, it's super sloppy. The wings are decent, I suppose, but they really don't have much posing going on. Yes, I get that's what the G1 toy was like, but this isn't G1. We can move past G1, you know? Same with the arms. They've recreated the split system so the biceps feel super jank. And the elbows are incredibly loose. The positioning of the bug legs feels rather out of place, though I guess it's not the worst thing in the world. The legs are okay, but aside from the shins, they're really lacking in mechanical detail. And even where it does show up, the red is super wispy and sloppy. But hey, at least he has ankle tilts that are difficult to make use of with the loose outward hips. But hey, at least it's there, I guess. That's the thing about this. There's just a lot of lacking build quality and tolerancing on show. Like, they couldn't even get the con badge lined up properly. I'd be a little more forgiving if this figure did anything else, but it doesn't. It gives you very little to latch onto, but hey, it's a G1 figure, so that gives it a pass for everything, I suppose. The only part that I genuinely like is the head sculpt. It's well sculpted and painted, featuring 2 shades of silver and some really nice yellow on the antennae. Again, great that these are rubber. Would be disastrous otherwise. But even then, the red is, again, sloppy. And it's just too big, because they insisted on having it transform identically to the G1 toy. The bug head is too small and the robot head is too big. Forget the simple and effective fold-over canopy, it has to be exactly like the G1 toy. And that's really where this toy begins to falter. Yes, he's accurate to the G1 original, but what about beyond that? Where else does it take the G1 design? What else does it try to do? Not even the articulation can save it. It's got all the standards you'd expect, but on this design, none of it particularly comes across well. Also doesn't help that it's a little back heavy with the wings and doesn't have proper ankles. Yeah, great idea, not having any support back there. And that's really the main issue with him. Everything works, everything functions, but what about after that? What else does this figure do beyond being a modern facsimile of the G1 toy and tune? What else does it do other than being a shelf box checked? That kind of toy is perfect for some people, endlessly filling their shelves with every character from the cartoon in a static A stance and not actually playing with them. But for collectors like myself who like to absorb everything a figure does, what good does it do? What good does it achieve? What's even the point? Ah well, maybe the next lad will generate some more interest. Oh wait, no, it's even worse! Legacy Shrapnel is actually a bit more frustrating because half of him is the stupid boredom of Kickback and half of him is baffling decisions that make no sense. Like, take the torso. It's fine, I suppose. The faux chrome is still very icky and undersized, but this wider aesthetic makes a lot more sense with the overall style of the robot mode. It's sort of imagining the G1 robot in a different lens, as if they took an alternate approach in the cartoon. Kind of like how those edits where you see Toon Prime with the wheels on his hip. But it stops making sense when you hit the massive shoulder line, made even worse with the way the mandibles work. He's just so ridiculously wide. Forget the long arms of Titan's Return, this is worse. And the flaps on the side make it even worse, drawing extra attention to the shoulders. Why is the kibble front and center? What, you couldn't have the torso shift or anything? The head is the opposite problem this time, it's just way too small. Or rather, the design of it is too small. The details just don't stand out, especially the tiny mohawk. It looks less like shrapnel and more like a thimble. Not to say it's worse than the previous one, but like if you're gonna f up the chest, at least give us a killer head sculpt. But it's nothing compared to the legs. Why are these thighs completely painted in pearlescent grey? Why does said pearlescent grey chip super easily? Why do the shins look like they're missing a chunk? Why did you keep all the thorax detail on the backs and leave nothing for the front? Why is the metallic yellow super messy? Why does he still have no heel spurs? Seriously, why do all of these have issues with heel spurs when the Legends did things fine? The Legends didn't even need them that much and they had them, but Legacy actually required support and didn't bother. Accessories are, again, just kinda eh. The bug leg thingers are just crap. That's the perfect word to describe them. I don't even think they deserve the full profanity. They're just cheap and lazy and don't contribute anything. Though his main weapon is pretty cool, probably because it's taking inspiration from the original. But again, none of these help the design look any more dynamic. Once again, it's just a question of why. Where's the source, slam or otherwise? Again, much like Kickback, this isn't the worst robot mode imaginable, but by the same token, it's just got nothing to it. Yes, it's mostly solid, but none of the details come across well. Yes, it has identical articulation to Kickback, only with a head swivel instead of a ball joint, but what good is that if it doesn't have proper dynamicism to make use of that posability? A slightly boring robot mode isn't the end of the world, but when you've got a rubbish transformation and a wonky as hell alternate mode, there's just nothing here that becomes worth it. Again, why should we settle for less just because it's an army builder? Wouldn't you want things to actually be good right off the bat? And Bombshell, well, it's hard to tell if it's better or worse. I guess it's kind of a side grade, mostly because of how he functions. See, because these two are designed side by side, they share a lot of DNA, arguably more than the bug modes. It's basically the entire lower half, and consequently that means all of those same issues are going to carry over. Chunks missing, no paint down low, too much scraping up high. It's all exactly as you'd expect. But then the top gives the illusion that things are going to be a bit better. The torso doesn't look as wonky as there's less kibble on show. It's so close to being the best of the three, and it kinda is by default. But what is this head? Why are you doing this? What's your problem? The head sculpt is cast in this ugly grey with only the mask spray painted. Why did you do this? What purpose does it achieve? It's a lovely head sculpt, don't get me wrong, but this deco just betrays it. Come on, this should be better. And what the f is at the back? Why is all this shit attached to the head? Why are you trying to recreate classic Starscream? I get trying to recreate the original, but this is ridiculous. The Combiner Wars version did this fine. Why did you have to make this like this? There's actually a hinge at the back here they could have used. This doesn't do anything in either mode. Why didn't you just use that? It's absurd. At least make the gun removable. You already have a part on the sprue where you have the exact same gun. Why not just make it a 2-in-1? I just don't... Making two versions of the same mold back-to-back isn't a bad concept, and for two figures that turn into similarly shaped bugs, it could hypothetically work. But here, it just doesn't. When you fuck up the first attempt, the second is gonna be just as bad. Neither of these are very good. They're not terrible either, but they're just flailing around making baffling decisions that just feel closer to the Prime Wars trilogy than the Unification era, which given the subject matter is incredibly ironic. And it just leaves you with a set of three buggos that do nothing. Honestly, I'd give these all the exact same score. A 3 that's just barely teetering on the edge of a 2. The only reason I haven't put them any lower is because there are far worse figures that deserve that score. These at least work fine in both modes as stand-ins, but beyond that, they basically accomplish nothing. And I think I can pinpoint their main issue. It's the ideology behind their designs. Yes, these three bring us back to designer Shuhei Umezu, one who's shown up on this channel a lot recently, and we still don't know what he looks like. While Takashi Kunihiro helped with Kickback, the entire set was primarily designed by Shuhei, and I'm starting to notice a pattern here. With a lot of figures he designs, not all of them, but a lot of them, when there's a source material to draw from, that's what he'll try to copy the most faithfully. It's not that he can't make original and cool stuff, it's just that he often tries to recreate the first outing to the best of his ability. Even seen on a video earlier this month, he literally did this with the Dinobots, getting as close to the 86 versions as he feasibly could within the assignment. Now, when the source material he's drawing on is awesome, this is a great idea. It means that none of the class of the original is lost. But what happens when the source material betrays him? What happens when the original is a steaming dog turd? The thing a lot of modern collectors don't realize is that not every G1 toy was treated with reverence when it first came out. Make no mistakes, there are some fantastic 80s releases, but not all of them were like that. Two releases from the first few years stand out especially, G1 Devastator and the G1 Insecticons. This isn't just me saying it, these are common punching bags within the G1 community. A lot of people consider these bastards to be some of G1's worst, and with good reason. Overly simplistic conversions, alt modes that don't really look like anything outside of the mandible sections, and massive hollowness in places that really shouldn't have it. By the standards of the time, not by modern standards, the G1 Insecticons are largely considered to be bad. And I'm inclined to agree. In fact, I didn't even pay for my copy, it was a prize from a trivia night, back when big meetups used to be a thing. I basically mooched off a far more knowledgeable contestant, and even then he just gave me the set because he didn't want the things. Yes, DrLockdown reviews, proving the only way you can make good content is by stealing other people's shit. The Insecticons are not a set that just works when you add articulation. You need to reinvent things to bring the idea into the modern era. And the big problem with the legacy versions is that they just haven't. They've basically attempted to copy the G1 originals without adding any extra sauce. And as a result, you're left with figures that are structurally sound, but not much else. There's a lot of leeway with the idea of G1 accuracy. You can make something accurate while still putting your own spin on it. But these figures don't spin a damn thing. There's nothing that really entices you. Hell, the few times where it does deviate, it's often for the worse. There really isn't a lot you need to change to make these more interesting. Alter the conversion a little, fix the legs, and honestly, these would be much more solid releases. The Primals versions already proved this, while still remaining reasonably accurate. Hell, if you want to see how little you'd need to change, just take a look at their retools and redecos in the Deluxe Insecticon lineup. Yes, these weren't the only Insecticons G1 graced us with. Hasbro needed more back in the 80s, so while the original 3 got yoinked from
Diaculum.
4 more additional ones were bestowed from Bandai, which after the Jetfire incident sadly meant they'd never show up on television. Initially, when seeing the legacy renditions guys would be retooled into these, I was a little apprehensive, but seeing how they turned out, there was basically nothing to worry about. Ransack basically changes nothing, but already this new deco is doing so much. The orange wings and crisp yellow bring so much visual interest, even if the plastic does look a bit funky. The new head isn't any smaller at a base level, but it's been resculpted so that it looks like a smaller head within a larger helmet, massively improving the proportions. It even looks a lot better in bug mode, with a new salient feature of the eyes, so if you prefer the old one, you still get it as a bonus piece. Not sure why you would though. I just wish the torso looked a bit nicer, as the dull smoky plastic does it no favors, but it's still way better overall. It then took 2 years before we got any word of these continuing, but when they did, oh boy did they go all out. Chop Shop looks absolutely gorgeous with his new color combo, especially with how much orange is on him. The torso actually kind of works now, and the head sculpt is killer. The bug mode looks fantastic, with new legs that actually differentiate things properly, though he weirdly has ace now. Better than missing a few though. The mandible and antennae combo works fantastically, and the new eye paint does wonders. Then Barrage takes things even further by basically flipping the entire torso backwards, and using that hinge from earlier to make a new chest plate. See, Bombshell? Was that so hard? You've got new paint that helps make him more premium, a fantastic head sculpt, and a bug mode that works pretty damn well. It's probably the messiest of the bunch, with double eyes and some ill-defined legs, but it makes way more sense than the box we got earlier. The fact these work so well, and even use the extended stylization a lot better, has led many folks to believe that the reason the legacy Insecticons are so compromised is because they already had the functionality for the deluxe versions baked in, and I can kinda see it. But at the same time, wouldn't they want the main G1 versions to do better than the exclusive retools? Seems a bit silly. Really, the only one I feel is a bit of a letdown is ironically the original mold, Venom. No, I'm not calling it by its copyright-friendly name, Marvel can f*** off. Although handled by a different designer who has had a much longer pedigree in the franchise, Venom ironically suffers from many of the same issues. He's basically just the G1 original with some added articulation, as well as the unfortunate hollowness and cheap feeling that's becoming a concerning hallmark of many of Age of the Prime's releases. He looks fantastic in both modes, but again, they just tried to recreate the original without adding anything new. Not as bad as the standard Insecticons, but a bit of a letdown after all the lead up. But you can see my point here, these molds and these characters thrive when you just give them a little extra. But without that, there's just not a lot they do well. I always see the argument that these are supposed to be simple and boring because that's exactly what the originals were like, but since when has that been an excuse? Some of the best figures Chug has given us take existing ideas and remix them in crazy ways, while still remaining true to the source. Wouldn't you want that for characters as iconic as the Insecticons? Wouldn't you want something as iconic as the Primals versions? Wouldn't you want something better? So the winner of this matchup is pretty set in stone. While not at every turn, the Legends Insecticons have just done these characters better overall. Not only do they embody the Insectoid vibes much more, but they're just more interesting toys. With that said, I don't think this is the end point for the Insecticons. The perfect set still hasn't quite been done yet, which is true of many Chug releases, sure, but y'all know how they do G1 updates. This won't be the last time we see the Insecticons. They'll be back eventually with new molds and designs, just after they've milked a few redecos here and there. I guess I should be happy that I have a set of these in Legends form anyway, and that at least we got a pretty decent lineup of the deluxe versions. Not those deluxes, those deluxes. God, it's confusing. But confusion aside, this was probably a massive waste of time, as people are likely going to continue buying the legacy ones, or the dramatic capture versions, or the eventual retro versions they're absolutely going to do. After all, what matters more than scale and representation, eh? Why actually care about the quality of the figures themselves? Oh well, the more things change, the more they stay the same. As always, fandom public consciousness is a conversation, even if sometimes it feels like I'm being ignored. So drop your thoughts on these remakes below. Do you think G1 toys should provide new twists, or should they be exactly like the originals? Would you go for a do-over of the Insecticons, or are you satisfied? And as always, remember, there's a context for everything. Till next time!